Chapter 7. Church watched as Dr. Crespi's face went pale, and his eyes seemed to glaze over with some ancient dream, a nightmare by the expression. Interesting. Perhaps they were kindred spirits, at least in shared experience. Or perhaps some little drone had jumped out at him from behind a rock on some piddling mission or other, frightened poor Crespi into soiling his skivvies. Traumatic, to be sure. Church gazed back down at the now sleeping drone, felt a trace of a smile tug at the corners of his mouth. Sometimes things came full circle. How fortunate that he was here to appreciate the irony of it. He blinked, and in that briefest flash of darkness, he remembered. Not the specifics, the sounds or smells, but the feeling of knowing the hatred for flesh, the silent screaming realized in the separation of body and spirit. Another blink, and it was gone. Below them, the beast hissed softly, asleep in its own dark reality. And now Church did smile, feeling a sudden rush of something like affection for the creature. After all, he was no longer in a cage. Dr. Crespi had gone positively numb in flashback, so Church politely cleared his throat before speaking. "Won't you let this spunky little fellow into your heart?" Crespi's eyes seemed to clear a bit, but he was still quite ashen. What if it can't jump out?" Church shook his head. "Don't worry, there's a force field, of course, and the pit is 7 meters deep, with no purchase, solid acid-neutralizing alloy." Crespi didn't look convinced, his gaze steady on the drone. Church pointed at one of the dozen electrodes set low into the walls of the enclosure. "See the electrodes? They're motion-activated. If an alien attempted to jump, it would be roasted alive." They stood and watched for a moment, but the napping creature didn't stir. Church turned and walked back up the ramp, stopping at the metal steps when he realized Crespi hadn't followed. "Colonel Dr. Crespi?" The man seemed to shake himself, then backed away from the viewing platform to join him. Church led him down the stairs and onto the main floor, over to the vid console. He tapped a few keys at a small screen, pulling up a layout grid for the lab connections. "This will give you an idea of the extent of this operation." Crespi studied the map, frowning thoughtfully. "This must utilize half the Innominata's non-renewable resources." Church smiled. "More like 5/8. When Crespi looked up, he was still frowning, but some color had come back into his face. "Why are you so eager to help me shut you down?" Church leaned past him, tapped a few more keys, then motioned up to the vid screen as it flared to life. "Ask me later. Heads up." The screen contained a close-up shot of the sleeping drone, the shielded camera illuminating the creature in full, glorious color. Church smiled again. He had to admit, he liked this part. He punched the small yellow button at his fingertip, and the drone sprang awake, screaming. Crespi's heart plummeted into his stomach as the horrible shriek echoed dully through the lab. The picture on the giant screen was one of pure rage, the alien leaping to its guard, arms outstretched and ready to destroy. Its long tail whipped around, lashed into the walls of the pit in a flurry of metallic slaps. Its jaws dripped ichor as it spun, searching for its tormentor. Church had shocked it, hard. He couldn't keep the tremor from his voice. "Why did you do that?" Church looked at him seriously, his earlier humor set aside. "It's necessary to administer electric shocks periodically when they're in captivity. Keeps them from going into a dormant state. I have 4 more adult specimens aboard in semi-cryogenic kennels. They don't live long isolated from their clan like this. I have to get all I can out of them." Crespi turned back to the screen, studied the angry drone. The research might be interesting, sure, but how could he stand to work with the monsters that had slaughtered his friends, his lover, had almost killed him? For months, years after the attack, he had been unable to talk about it, the mere mention of the breed leaving him pale and shaking. And yet, to tell you the truth, I wouldn't mind giving that thing a shock or two for old lang syne myself. I had a run-in with a nest of them once. Church's gaze was cool, unreadable. You don't say. Crespi looked at the creature alone in the pen, hissing softly again, pivoting its obscene head slowly from side to side. Yes, years ago, a long time, on a rock near Solano's moon. They attacked my squadron and killed everyone but me. We knew they were dangerous, of course, but we didn't know. He faltered, searched for the right words, and came up blank. I didn't know how they were. Crespi couldn't seem to pull his gaze away from the drone. He felt like he was sinking back into the memories of that horrible day, memories he had tried hard to lose. What I remember, all I remember is that skin, that stink, flashes of teeth. Gibbs, he looked at Church and realized he was babbling about things that the doctor probably had already had experience with. Anyway, everyone died. Church's eyes were still without emotion. Dear me, how awful for you. Crespi nodded, tried to regroup. That was a long time ago, a lifetime. He pushed the memories away, refocused on Church. Say, didn't I read that you survived an encounter as well? He had, in Church's stat sheet before he'd left Earth. Nothing specific except the date, some 40 years ago. Sir, the system is ready? Crespi started, turned. A young tech in a clean grey coverall had joined them. Church smiled. Very good, Hawks. He motioned at Crespi. This is Colonel Dr. Crespi. He's here to uncover our illegal operation. Hawks snapped a salute, his face uncertain. How do you do, sir? Illegal operation. I don't understand. Church walked to another vid screen, calling out over his shoulder. That's all right, Hawks. Neither does he. Just step over here, Doctor. Crespi returned the salute impatiently and followed Church. He wasn't here to swap horror stories. The shock of seeing a live drone again was wearing off rapidly. It was time for a few straight answers. Is it, Doctor? Or is it just time to avoid remembering anymore? Crespi told his mind to shut up. The screen they stood in front of was bigger and showed a different view of the pen. Crespi frowned as a door slid open from the enclosure to some type of corridor, probably into the labyrinth of sub-level passageways that he had seen on Church's layout grid. The older man spoke softly, as if explaining to a child. That door leads into the maze. Once inside, the creature will be confronted with choices. Let's see if you can second-guess its behaviour. Crespi scowled, opened his mouth to speak, and then thought better. The video image changed, the camera angle from behind the drone as it cautiously moved into the corridor. There was a small table, bolted into the wall of the passage, and on top was a pig, a real pig, drugged or asleep. And next to that, there's a man in there. Crespi could hear the anxiety in his own voice. The guy was armoured and armed, but Jesus, what was Church doing? The bespectacled doctor nodded calmly. Yes, aliens don't have eyes. They can't be fooled by holograms. But don't worry, I've taken every precaution. If the alien attacks, the automatic sensors will activate the electrodes. Now, Crespi, that drone is starving. And as you may know, these creatures are very fond of pig. What will it do? Church was relaxed, self-assured. Obviously, he couldn't go around killing volunteers. The project would have to be foolproof safe, although Crespi wondered just what the hell they had offered that man to go in there alone. He swallowed, tried to consider the question clearly. Well, I know it won't retreat, but starving. The thing's starving. I think it'll attack the pig, eat, and then attack the man. The drone crept closer to the two choices, hissing low in its dark throat. Wrong, Crespi. Church's voice was a whisper. R-O-N-G. Wrong. The alien shrieked and lunged for the suited man, its talons extended. Crespi just had time to see the terror on the poor man's face before he raised his weapon. Too late. A flash of brilliance, and the drone screamed again, this time in frustration and pain. It crumpled to the floor, dazed, steam or smoke rising up from its black exoskeleton. The armed man was pale but unharmed. He backed up to a door a few meters behind him and exited quickly. Church went on as if nothing particularly interesting had happened. As you saw, it barely hesitated. It was starved to death before it would neglect an opportunity to attack an enemy. Crespi nodded, willed his pounding heart to slow down. Church gestured at the unmoving drone on the screen. I believe they don't consider themselves as individuals. They fight for their species, not themselves. They cannot be frightened, intimidated, or bribed into not attacking, as a threat to one is a threat to all. And to leave that threat standing is to go against their basic instinctual drive. Pain, fatigue, overwhelming odds. Nothing mitigates their aggression. He nodded towards the vid. The drone had pulled itself to its feet slowly and now hissed at its unseen enemy. Church smiled faintly. As you can see, it's up and at 'em again. In a minute, it will have to make another choice. The alien moved closer to the pig, and the cameras switched to an overhead view. Crespi could see that there was a chain binding one of the pig's legs to the table. The noise of the attack had woken it somewhat, and it grunted sleepily as the creature approached. To the left of the food animal was a small passage, set into the floor. The alien stood between the pig and the exitway, its tail clattering lightly on the floor behind it. Church enlarged the vid slightly with the touch of a button. Here, it is confronted with a choice between food and the possibility of escape. That small tunnel leads to a storage room. The alien can sense that there are no men down the tunnel. If it wants to escape, that's the route to take. Crespi raised his eyebrows. The drone would want the food, but against the chance to escape. The creature turned towards the passageway as the pig waffled to itself. Crespi felt his muscles relax slightly. He hadn't even realized how tense he had been until... The drone spun, shrieked, and tore the now screaming pig off of the chain. The high-pitched squeals of the terrified animal filled the lab as the monstrous black talons pierced its hide, spewing thick streams of blood against the wall. The alien thrust its head forward, and its inner jaws shot out and tore into the flesh of the helpless pig. The animal seemed to explode in a mass of writhing, dying flesh, the heavy blood spraying the drone's malefic form as it shrieked again in conquest. No electrodes this time. Crespi turned away from the screen, unable to watch the creature feed. And as he turned, he saw Church studying the video image intently. Church was smiling.